The disappearance of Brandon Swanson. What happens? Brandon Swanson, born on January 30, 1989, into the family of Brian and Annette Swanson in Marshall, Minnesota. Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student who was enrolled in a wind turbine program at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby. On the night of May 13, 2008, Brandon attended two different parties to celebrate. He was seen drinking at both parties, but according to his friends, he didn't drink enough to become overly intoxicated. The route Brandon drove from the gathering in Canby to Marshall was familiar to him. It was the same route that he took every day to attend classes. But for some reason, Brandon avoided the highway and took the back roads. At around 2 a.m. on the morning of May 14th, Brandon called his parents from his cell phone, informing them that he had driven his car into a ditch on his way home, from which he could not remove the car. He assured his parents that both he and the car were fine and that he merely needed to be picked up. Both Brandon and his parents had agreed to flash their headlights on and off in order to signal to each other once they got to the location, and they drove out to pick him up. However, they were unable to locate him. Brian stayed with his car and tried to signal them by flashing his lights on and off, but they saw nothing, and neither did he see them. After several failed attempts at locating Brandon using this method, tensions began to rise. "Don't you see me?" he asked his parents. Brandon finally gave up and told them he was leaving the car to walk toward lights he could see, which led him to believe he was near Lind, a small town roughly 7 miles, 11 kilometers southwest of Marshall. He told his father to head for the parking lot of a local bar and wait for him there. Brian began driving there, talking to his son as he did. Shortly after 2:30 a.m., 47 minutes into the call, Brandon suddenly interrupted himself on the phone and said, "Oh, shit." He was silent for the remainder of the call until his parents hung up and made multiple attempts to call him back. At 6:30 a.m., his parents reported Brandon missing to the local police. They were told at first that it was hardly unusual for young men that age to stay out all night after the last day of college classes. Annette Swanson, Brandon's mom, specifically recalled that one of the officers said it was Brandon's right to be missing. What? Later that morning, the Lind police did start a search but found no trace of Brandon in the town or outside. They requested that the office of the Lyon County Sheriff assist them to better focus the search. When police obtained Brandon's cell phone records, they discovered that on the night he disappeared, he had actually been near Porter, which is roughly 25 miles away from where he told his parents he was. Shortly thereafter, his car was located in a ditch near Taunton. There was nothing else found amiss with the car, and due to the grass and gravel in the area surrounding it, there were no tracks and thus no way to tell what direction Brandon might have started walking. We were able to use the cell phone tower technology to get an idea of where his last communications or phone calls came from, so that put us on a cell tower up in that area, said Wallen, one of the police officers. So then the search was focused there, and the car was located. The keys weren't found on the scene, and there were no obvious signs of foul play. The vehicle simply looked like it was stuck in the ditch, or partially in the ditch. There was nothing odd about it. If a person passed by, they would think it was just parked there or broken down and stuck. Once the search finally did begin, it was an extensive one, including hundreds of volunteers, trained search dogs, and air surveillance. Search operations covered both the land and the yellow medicine. Following the scent to the water, one of the dogs continued up across the other side and along the riverbank to another gravel road, where it continued north towards the Yellow Medicine County line and ended. "There's nothing to suggest he's in the river," Brandon's mother said. Brian, Brandon's dad, also recalls that, despite having consumed alcohol earlier in the evening, his son did not appear disoriented or confused during their phone calls. What exactly do you believe happened to Brandon? After the original search found no sign of Brandon, most efforts were discontinued. The Swansons left their porch light on all night every night in the hope that Brandon would return or be found, and they still do.